Good evening, Dungeon Masters. I'm Baron Derop. So you've played through one of those entry-level campaigns like the Lost Mine of Fendelver, the Dragon of Icespire Peak, or even the Dragons of Stormwreck Island, and now you've decided it's high time to create your own world to adventure in. But where do you start? And how do you create enough of a game world in as short a time as possible so you can start playing in just a few weeks? Begin by including your players in the process. Tell your players you want to start a new campaign, but that this campaign building process will need a bit of their help. Ask your players to send you a handful of statements about the game world for you to draw inspiration from. Better yet, get them to do this in a group chat so everyone can collaborate together. For this initial idea generation, even before your players create characters, ask each of them to offer single sentence statements about what they would like to see in the game world's reality. Remember too that you should also be sharing a few statements with the players, but don't give anything away that might be part of your main plotline you're dreaming up. If you need help to coach your players on what makes a good statement or idea, get them to focus on things that are strange and dramatic and which imply more questions than answers. Ancient ruins dot the nearby forest and nobody knows who built them, a schism has just occurred in the sun goddess's church, or owl bears are quite peaceful when intoxicated on forest mushrooms are all good examples of these kinds of statements. Doing this not only gives you a creative springboard for world building later, but also provides your players some context and a sense of ownership over the world you're making together. Since your players will have contributed to it, and in some aspects already have a loose understanding about the game world status quo, their emotional investment will pay dividends while they're creating character backstories. You'll find these backstories already fit into the game world you're creating together. Remember though, this is your campaign setting, and it's your responsibility to create a game world you'll enjoy running. So if a player's idea is too far off track from your initial concept, gently steer them back on track. You have the final say on what is canon in your campaign after all. With a few inspirational prompts to work from, it's time to map out a regional adventuring area. Doodling a map on some paper is fine, but consider painting one or using a hex mapping tool to keep track of distances more easily, like hexfriend.net. Be sure to include the settlement or town where the players will start, a few population centers the party might visit, a weird or haunted place or two, and the location of a dungeon. At this beginning phase, try to keep your map focused and small. In reality, a campaign doesn't need much room to adventure in. While you might be excited to create an immense game world right out of the gate, doing so will lead to creating a ton of material you won't see at the table in any reasonable amount of time. Try to keep your map zoomed in enough to illustrate what your players can walk across in about a week on foot. That's plenty of geography for your players to get lost, turned around, attacked by dragons, and fight a demon horde coming through a portal on the far side of the mountain. Once your map is complete, also come up with a random encounter table. I've got a video detailing how to do this, which I'll link to at the end of the video, but for your first random encounter table, filling out 11 possible entries on a 2d6 bell curve is totally fine. Remember to add a few peaceful or non-violent creatures to the list as well, since not everything in the wilderness wants to utterly destroy the party. Don't stop with just a list of monsters, however. Add details about the motivations or problems the creatures have. Perhaps some pilgrims got lost and are looking for a holy ruin, a gladiator is looking for a suitable combatant to test his skills, and cultists are carrying secret messages back and forth from their dungeon lair to a corrupt church in town. If you get stuck filling up the random encounter table, refer back to the prompts from your earlier brainstorming exercise. Once you complete this, you can roll on the random encounter table when your players get lost, are looking for something in the wilderness, or anytime you think a random encounter would be appropriate. Remember that whatever is on your random encounter table can influence the tone of your campaign overall, so make sure that the encounters reflect the kind of story you want to tell. Lastly, don't worry too much about putting one or two powerful monsters in the lineup. Your players can always run away if things look like an unfair fight, and the local dragon can just make its presence known by flying overhead if the players are at a low level. Before we continue, I'd like to take a moment to thank this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anyone who loves learning and wants to explore their creativity to learn new skills. Something I'm always looking for is an unusual way to level up my dungeon mastering or world building by learning what I can from different hobbies, and Skillshare doesn't disappoint. Recently, I've enjoyed Peggy Dean's course on painting a map keepsake with watercolor. The skills I learned from Peggy Dean were obviously geared toward someone interested in scrapbooking, but the same skills could be used to make an extremely artistic and authentic looking world map for your RPGs. Could you imagine dropping a hand-painted watercolor of a map in front of your players for their first game session? I promise you they'd be blown away. Do you have a specific skill you're trying to learn? Skillshare is the perfect place to start. From photography and illustration to graphic design or even entrepreneurship, you can find classes that will match your goals and interests. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Now back to the video. Next, it's time to make a dungeon. There are way too many tutorials online for making dungeon complexes, so just pick one that seems to strike your fancy and roll with it. However, if you'd like some quick and dirty advice, here you go. Make a rough 3-level dungeon flowchart with a dozen rooms or so per level. Next, label each level with a thematic motif. For example, crypt, fire and ice, and shadows are all fine enough prompts, and can help you place monsters, treasures, traps, or decorations, or whatever else in your dungeon. Be sure to place an interesting magic item somewhere on each level, too. If you already have ideas about what your main campaign's antagonist will be, it might be a good idea to place any magic items the players need to stop that antagonist at the bottom of this dungeon. If you want, you can also create another random encounter table specific to this dungeon, since there are probably monsters skulking about in here that aren't present in your overworld area. Skeletons, fire and ice imps, and wraiths would all be present based on the aforementioned prompts, but might not be wandering around outside. Next, it's time to think about what might be in the town the players start in. It's a good idea to involve your players in this too. Queue up that group chat from earlier and ask them some questions about their starting town. These questions might include who runs the town and who would rather run it in their place, what's the name of the local tavern, and what meal are they best known for? What kind of deity is worshipped in the town? Is there a secret guild or cult most people don't know about? Or anything else you can think of. Remember though, before you start asking questions of your players, you'll probably already have a clear idea of what your campaign's plot looks like, so you might be able to answer all these questions on your own. However, any questions which aren't directly related to the plot you have brewing are fair game to let your players chew on. If you let them collaborate with you in this way, not only will they have a vague idea about the dangerous stuff outside of town, they will also know that the local tavern, named Scratch Bottoms, is a flophouse with a tasty breakfast, so long as you don't mind risking a lice infestation. The players will already feel like they live in the town, and you'll avoid a lot of awkward new player syndrome as a result. As a bonus, create a few more NPCs the players may interact with to get information, supplies, healing, or something else. Use the stats for generic NPCs out of the monster manual and focus on their appearance and personality quirks. This will keep your NPCs feeling real when your players meet them. Once all that's complete, you've made enough world for your players to start exploring. But keep in mind, while this much prep work will likely be enough to carry your players through level 7 or so, nothing is stopping you from adding more nearby regions and fleshing out more of the world as your players adventure. This video was inspired by Ray Otis's Gygax 75 challenge, which details a world building process similar to this one, and which itself was inspired by an article written by Gary Gygax in 1975. I'll put a link to Otis's walkthrough in the description. If you'd like to help me make more content like this in the future, please consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a channel member. Thanks for watching, Dungeon Masters, and until next time, good night.